The saddest moment of my life wasn't when the doctor said the words. It was 2 weeks later, in our bedroom, watching Jack try to button a light blue shirt. His hands, those beautiful, steady hands I loved, trembled. Just for a second. He couldn't get the third button through. He looked up at me, and his smile... God, his smile was still the same. Bright, a little crooked. But now it held a secret we both knew. "Still fits," he said, his voice a soft rasp. I knew it didn't. I could see the space between the cotton and his skin, a gap that hadn't been there before, a hollow where life was slowly leaving. That's when my heart truly broke. Not with a scream, but with a silent, shuddering crack, like ice giving way underfoot. He didn't want pity. He didn't want to fight. The day we got the news, stage 4, no miracles left on the shelf, he just held my hand. He didn't cry. He looked out the window of that sterile room at a sliver of Georgia sky and said it. "I don't want my last memories to be hospitals, Bella. I want one more day, just like the first day I met you. One last day like the first, a day before fear, a day when everything was possibility and nervous laughter." So that's what we did. I drove us into Savannah under a sky the color of a faded peach, the same cafe, the same corner table, sticky from decades of spilled sugar. Jack sipped his coffee and made a face. "They still haven't figured it out," he joked, the familiar tease in his tone. I laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from a place I thought was sealed shut, and then I had to look down, fast, because the sight of him laughing, alive in that moment, was more painful than any goodbye. The sun caught the gold in his hair, and for a flicker, he was just my Jack again. Not a patient. My Jack. We walked. God, we walked so slowly. Our first date was a ramble, full of energetic steps and pointed fingers towards interesting buildings. This was a pilgrimage. Each block was a mountain. I held his arm, not for romance, but for balance. I could feel the delicate architecture of his bones through his sleeve. He stopped often, pretending to catch his breath for the view, but I saw the effort, the slight strain around his eyes. "Promise me something," he whispered once, his head close to mine as we looked at the river. "Promise you'll remember me like this, out here, with you, not the hospital version." I just nodded, pressing my lips together so tight they went numb. I couldn't promise. I knew I'd remember it all, the good and the bad, because the bad meant he was still here. Then, by the water, he pulled a small bundle of envelopes from his jacket. They were different colors, addressed to me in his messy scrawl. "Letters," he said simply. "One for every year I thought we'd have." He placed them in my hands. They felt heavy, like bricks. "Don't read them yet, okay? Just not yet." The weight of his future, the one we were robbed of, sat in my palms. It was the most beautiful and devastating gift I'd ever received. Later, on a bench overlooking the slow brown water, he stood up. He was wobbly. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." "Jack, there's no music." He smiled, that endless smile. "Since when did we need it?" So I stood, and we danced, right there on the cobblestones, my arms around his neck, his hands resting lightly on my waist. There was no music, just the wind in the old oaks, the distant cry of gulls, and the ragged, beautiful sound of our breathing. People passed. They stared. Some smiled with soft understanding. Others looked quickly away. I didn't care about any of them. In that moment, his forehead resting against mine, his eyes closed, he wasn't sick. And I, for the first time in months, wasn't afraid. We were just a boy and a girl, dancing at the end of the world. As the sun began to dip, painting everything in fiery gold and deep violet, We found our spot, the grassy knoll in the park where, on our third date, he'd first told me he loved me. He spread the blanket and slowly lowered himself down. I lay beside him, careful, curling into the space his body made. The air grew cool. He was quiet for a long time, just tracing patterns on my arm. His voice, when it came, was so quiet I felt it more than heard it. I didn't get a long life, but I got a real love. That has to count for something, Bella. That has to be enough. I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't enough, that I wanted decades, not days. But the peace on his face, it stole my words. So I just held him tighter, breathing in the scent of his skin, his shampoo, the unique smell that was just him. His breathing changed as the stars came out. It became slower, deeper, more deliberate. His hand found mine and his fingers, growing cooler, laced through mine and held on. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned his head, his lips brushing my temple in a ghost of a kiss, and he whispered, so faint it was almost part of the night breeze, my name. Bella. Then he fell asleep. The weight of him against me changed. The rhythm of his chest stilled. The world didn't end. The crickets kept singing. The city lights still twinkled in the distance. But everything was different. I held him for a long time, until the last of the warmth left his hand, until the sky was fully black. He left the hospital 2 days later, but he left me on that grass, under those first stars. I still go to that cafe. I sit at our table. I order 2 terrible coffees. I walk our route, my steps alone now on the old stones. And sometimes, when the afternoon sun slants through the trees just right, throwing long, dancing shadows, I swear I can feel him. Not a ghost. Just a memory so vivid it has weight. A pressure on my arm. A whisper in my ear, asking for one more dance. This isn't a story about an ending. It's a story about a choice. His choice to face the darkness with a smile that could still light up a room. My choice to walk with him right to the edge of it, even though I knew I'd be left standing alone in the cold. And if you asked me, if I had to do it all over again, knowing the heartbreak that was waiting, I'd choose that single, perfect, heartbreaking day. I'd choose him every single time. 2 weeks after we buried him, the silence in our apartment was a physical thing. It had weight. It sat on the furniture, filled the spaces in the cupboards where his coffee mug used to be, and followed me from room to room. I moved through it like I was underwater. Every action slow, every sound muffled. I hadn't touched the letters. They sat on our dresser, a neat, colorful stack next to the bottle of his cologne I couldn't bring myself to move. They felt like a landmine, a piece of him I wasn't ready to lose, because once I read them, that was it. There would be no more new words from Jack. My mom called every day. My friends texted. They used words like closure and grieving process. They didn't understand. I wasn't looking for closure. I was trying to figure out how to live in a world that had lost its color, how to be Bella when half of Bella was gone. The first letter I opened wasn't planned. It was a Tuesday. Rain streaked the windows, making the world outside look blurred and broken. I was pulling a sweater from my drawer, and my hand brushed against something rough, not fabric, paper, tucked beneath a stack of my own t-shirts, hidden. A single envelope, white, with my name. No year marked. My hands went cold. Then they started to shake. I sat on the edge of the bed, the rain tapping its fingers on the glass. I slid my thumb under the flap. The tears sounded too loud in the quiet room. Bella, if you found this, it means I was clever, and you're probably mad at me for snooping in your drawer. It's the one with the loose knob, by the way. I told you I'd fix it. I'm writing this the night after our first day. You're asleep next to me. You're crying in your sleep. Your face is all crumpled, and it's taking everything I have not to wake you up and tell you I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you. Don't be mad. I needed to say that. The thing is, I'm not scared of dying. I'm terrified of you being alone. I'm scared you'll stop listening to that terrible punk band you love because it reminds you of me. I'm scared you'll sell my guitar. Mostly, I'm scared you'll think this love was a tragedy because it ended too soon. It wasn't. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Every second. Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. So here is your first mission, if you choose to accept it. It's a scavenger hunt. I left something for you at the record store downtown. Tell Gary at the counter I owe him $20, and he'll give you the next clue. Don't leave me hanging. Always, Jack. A sob ripped out of me. It wasn't a gentle cry. It was ugly and gasping, and it shook my whole body. He'd planned this. While I was sleeping, while I was falling apart beside him, he was writing me a roadmap back to myself. I drove through the rain to the dusty, dimly lit record store we used to spend hours in. The bell jingled. Gary, an older man with tattoos covering his arms, looked up from behind the counter. His expression shifted from bored to painfully gentle when he saw me. He didn't say a word. He just reached under the counter and pulled out a vinyl record. It was that terrible punk album, the one with the scratched cover we'd found at a flea market. He paid for it months ago, Gary said, his voice rough. Said to give it to you when you were ready. Taped to the cover was another envelope. Back in my car, the rain hammering on the roof, I opened it. See? Told you. Now, I know you. You're probably sitting in your car in the rain being dramatic. Go home, put the record on, loud, and look behind the fridge. And yes, I finally fixed that loose knob. I laughed, a wet, choked sound that mixed with my crying. I drove home. I pushed the fridge away from the wall, my hands leaving streaks in the dust. There was a small, flat box taped to the back. Inside was a new guitar pick and a simple silver key on a ring. The note said, Storage Unit B17, 2123 River Street, tomorrow. Bring coffee. Not from that first cafe. That stuff is poison. I did what he said. I put the record on. I turned it up until the distorted guitars and shouting vocals filled the apartment, vibrating in my chest, chasing away the silence. And for the first time since he left, I didn't feel alone. I felt conspired with. The next morning, I brought 2 coffees from the decent place across town. The storage facility was a grim, concrete row of garages. My hand was steady as I slid the key into the lock for Unit B17. I took a deep breath and lifted the rolling door. It wasn't storage. It was a studio. His studio. He'd rented it months ago when he was still strong enough. His easel stood in the center, a blank canvas waiting. Tubes of paint were neatly organized on a table. His favorite brushes, clean and standing in a jar. On the walls were sketches, dozens of them. All of me. Me laughing, me reading, me sleeping on the couch, me looking out a window, my profile thoughtful. He saw me in ways I never saw myself. Not as beautiful, but as alive, full of light and thought and feeling. On the easel was a final note. Hi again. I know you're going to say you can't paint. I don't care. This is your place now. The rent is paid for a year. The world is too colorless without you in it, Bella. So put some color back in it. For you. For me. Make a mess. Be loud. Get it wrong. Don't you dare live a small, quiet life. That's not who you are. That's not who we were. I loved you first on a sunny day in Savannah, but I loved you most every day after, even the gray ones, especially the gray ones. Now go, be brilliant, and And when you smile again, a real one that reaches your eyes, I'll know. All my love, for all of time, Jack. I sank to the dusty concrete floor, the 2 coffees cooling beside me. I cried until my head ached, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't just about the loss. They were about being seen, being known so completely that he could reach across the impossible distance of death and hand me a reason to keep going. I didn't start painting that day, or the next, but I started going to the studio. I'd sit, I'd look at the sketches, I'd touch the brushes. One afternoon, I squeezed a blob of cadmium red onto the palette. Just to see the color, it was vivid, insistent, alive. I made my first mark on the canvas weeks later. It was a shaky, terrible line. I hated it. I almost threw the brush, but I heard his voice, clear as day in my memory. Make a mess. Get it wrong. So I did. I'm still getting it wrong. Most of the time. The paintings are bad. Really bad. But the process, the act of creating something from the emptiness, it's stitching me back together. I go on our walks. I drink the terrible coffee sometimes, just to laugh. And I dance. In my kitchen, in the studio, on the riverfront. There's never any music, just the wind and the memory of his voice saying my name. He didn't give me a cure. He didn't give me more time. He gave me something better. He gave me a way to carry our love forward, not as an anchor, but as a compass. He loved me so much he spent his last days building a life for me, a life without him. The grief hasn't gone away. Some days it still knocks the air from my lungs, but now there's a thread of gold running through it. His love, my choice. I choose to live. I choose to make a mess. I choose to remember the first day, the last day, and every impossible, beautiful day in between. I still miss him, every second. But I am not lost. I am Bella, and I am still loved.